Hi, Jonathan. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Chef, how's it going?
It's great. How's everything down on the farm?
Fantastic. Every day is special here.
So, how did you first get connected to the Ecology Center?
Yeah, it's a great story, and there's both a long and a short version, but pretty much I started my own nonprofit in San Diego doing environmental education in schools. And I did that for 5 years. One of the initiatives that we had just launched and was gaining a lot of visibility and steam and enthusiasm was this double-decker bus that we would take to schools. It had a kitchen on the bottom and a greenhouse on top. And the idea was really engaging with students around food, really food as a driver for health, not just personal, but environmental and community. So we had this great program, and like I said, it was very exciting. And right around that time, I had been connected to Evan, who's the founder of the Ecology Center. Both of us being young, energetic, fairly unconventional nonprofit founders, most of whom are a lot older than both of us. And we got together and discussed both the challenges as well as the opportunities ahead of us, individually and collectively, as a movement and as two different small organizations. And this was, almost 10 years ago. And pretty quickly, we decided that this work would be more fun and more effective if we did it together. So we merged our two nonprofits. This was in the conversation started in 2015 and were formalized in 2016. So I guess 8 years now. And that's really been it.
That's fantastic. So, how did you figure out what your role was going to be once you guys merged?
I mean, since then and today, I don't really have a specific role at the Ecology Center. Evan and I both operate as entrepreneurs, or I like to think of it as an intrapreneur, right? An entrepreneur from the inside. And we both really focus on what's most relevant, impactful, interesting, innovative, creative. So, he wears a very specific hat around creative design and vision, and I'm really more focused on the community element. So anything that I feel is interesting and exciting to do around building community, like the dinners that we'll discuss, as well as we do a music festival that we hosted just for the second time this year. We do movie nights. Really, whatever I think seems most fun, to be honest, is what I focus on.
Which makes sense. That's what we should be focusing on in our businesses because that's what will prosper, when we love what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, how did the community tables get created? I mean, what you guys do every Friday night, I would say is a lot of people's dream to experience, to go out on a farm, eat food that was harvested from that land in a gorgeous setting over real fire with friends and like minded individuals. You guys have created and consistently executed a lot of people's dream. So, how did that come to fruition? When did you guys launch the community table program?
Yeah, so the Ecology Center turns 15 this year in November. And from the very, very beginning, breaking bread was a central theme in the programming, the narrative, and the conversation. As an environmental nonprofit, there's a lot of different ways that you can take your narrative and your messaging. And a lot of it, in my experience, having been in this field for 20 years now, is pretty accusatory and a little intense. It's, if you don't live this way, you're a part of the problem, and don't do this and don't do that. And that is certainly an important message at times. But I quickly really found in my career that you're going to have a lot more success when you can draw people into the movement through beauty and experience and flavors and community and really say, instead of being against something, being really for something. So for us, the easiest way to do that has always been by hosting culinary experiences. The community table started at the Ecology Center far before I was here, 15 years ago. And it was even before this was a farm. We were a 1 acre historic farmhouse and a permaculture garden. And the idea was hosting meaningful conversations with farmers, chefs, and the community. So it was once or two times and ultimately quarterly dinner that we would host, usually with 30 people in the courtyard right alongside the house. And we would invite a farmer out and we would invite a chef out, and we would have this interactive conversation around a meal. And that grew over the years till about 2020, 2021, when we introduced what we called the Hearth Dinner Series. And that was a summer with Chef Tim Byers from Texas, a James Beard Award winner, who really wrote the book, quite literally, called Smoke, about cooking over live fire. So he's an expert and a culinary anthropologist that's very excited about experimenting and telling stories around food. So he came out here for the summer, and we did dinners every Friday and Saturday night, all cooked on fire in that same dining room where we do the community table dinners now. And that was after we had taken over the farm, so it was in deep relationship to the ingredients that were 50 feet away. And that was our first step into a more consistent expression of hospitality and kind of holding that culinary piece and the operations that go along with that, and the community, of course, right? From both a marketing and storytelling standpoint, as well as just from a how do you literally show up and sell these seats and make it worth people's time and while. So we did that for a full summer. Like I said, doing 2 dinners a week, Friday, Saturday, and it was really challenging. You know, I come from a bit of a food service background myself, so I know that many of us do it 7 days a week, but there's something particularly energetically challenging about doing it in the middle of the farm, which is that it's not a restaurant, right? So you pretty much need to set it up every single day and start from scratch. You're not running the same menu every day. You're running a different menu every day based off of what's available. So it was a very, very successful and very challenging expression. And that led us in the following year into re-envisioning the roots of the community table dinner, which was a different chef and farmer a few times a year. And we said, hey, we now have this fairly world-class facility, this beautiful outdoor kitchen, this amazing regenerative organic farm. What if we were to just ratchet that up? And it was a total experiment because we both didn't know if there would be enough chefs that would be interested in participating, as well as if the community would be interested in participating. But very fortunately, from the first year on, we're now in our second year of doing full-time every Friday night community table dinners. There's been nothing but enthusiasm from chefs and community. You know, we have this dinner series that, you know, I say humbly, sells out every single week and is full of new people who are excited about the conversation and want to participate at a higher level and want to learn and really enjoy a farm tour before their dinner and really like the speaking points that are part of and the narrative tied into the story. So what that looks like now and has for the past 2 years is this modern iteration of community table, where every Friday night we have a different chef, usually from LA, San Diego, Orange County, sometimes from Northern California, sometimes from the Inland Empire. This week, we actually have a chef that's coming up from Mexico. He's in Valle de Guadalupe. So we have, I'd like to call it the bioregion, which is pretty much 50 to 75 miles in either direction. So we have a different chef every Friday night. We have this really beautiful world-class outdoor, I call it a dining room, but it's really kind of, redwood tables and flowers and candles under the stars and string lights. And then we have this kitchen where everything is cooked on fire. So we have multiple different cooking appliances, as I might call them, but I'm talking about like a Santa Maria oven or a wood burning smoker or a wood burning pizza oven. And then we've got this kind of central, really there's nothing else to call it, but kind of like inferno situation of tiered and stacked roasting layers, and everything comes off of the farm. So the chef that week gets a produce availability list from our farm team. We welcome them to come a day or 2 or 3 if they like in advance. They can walk the field, they can help harvest, they can conceptualize a menu, and then we serve that meal to 72 guests. And like I said, really tie in the story piece. So it begins with a farm tour and just a conversation, and hopefully an interactive conversation where it's not just me leading, but really people bringing their own interests and questions and ambitions into the narrative, and talking about like what are these issues that are ahead of us, not just what are the challenges, but what are the opportunities, and how can we create a future of health for bodies and our environment and our wildlife and our waterways, and why does all that matter? And then how can we be a part of the solution? And then, like I said, you get to kind of coalesce that around a delicious and beautiful meal, and what can go wrong? You know? So now all of a sudden you are shifting culture and behavior through something that was fun and unique and special instead of yelling at people for being jerks.
Yeah, I find when you're sitting down at that table after you've spent, an hour on the land, you've walked the land, you conversed in nature, maybe you got to try something that's in the fields, and you go and sit down, your nervous system's already been calmed because of the time that you've now spent outside. And as you're enjoying this meal with new friends, new people that you're sitting next to, and you're under the stars, you realize you want more of this in your life. And you can't help but think, how do I experience this more often? How can I recreate this in my own life? How can I do this with friends and family? How can I take this back to wherever I live and do it again and again and again? That was my takeaway.
Yeah, it's funny because the dinners are really quite opposite from how we break bread and how we share meals in our society today. They are outdoors. You're sitting at a table with 8 people, maybe four or five or six of whom you hadn't met before. You're certainly not encouraged to be on your phone the whole time, right? It's probably a 3 or 3.5 hour experience. So if you think about like how we're eating mostly, it's either like takeout or delivery, or you're sitting at a table maybe with someone and you're on your phone and you're in and you're out. And like none of those things build health and none of them build relationship. You can't via a food delivery service learn about where your food is coming from or who's preparing it. It's quite the opposite. So, it almost shocks people back into how things used to be. Like I like to talk a lot about, ecological design or permaculture or agroforestry, these practices that we have here at the Ecology Center. A lot of times they're lauded as innovation. And I like to think of it as really quite the opposite. It's just, this is how it used to be. This is when your grandma or great grandpa talks about like, oh, I grew this and that was our family's lineage of this particular seed and why we grew it, or this is how we canned or preserved things. Like, everybody had relationship to food for all of human history, and it's not until quite recently that we've industrialized that, and not just the process of agriculture, but really even the process of consumption and production, right? Like we've industrialized our kitchens, we've industrialized how we consume food, and none of it really ultimately has built health for any of the things around us. So, as much as this is kind of the new model that we're introducing, it really is just how things were.
Yeah, is reminding us of the old model. And what I love about this is it also is getting us comfortable with eating maybe new foods, introducing, new varieties into our diets. When I volunteered in the kitchen, I had to slice up a ton of zucchini, enough zucchini for, over 160 people to eat. And there were zucchini varieties and colors and shapes I had never seen before. There was also spikes on the zucchini, and I hadn't experienced spikes on a zucchini. So I'd love to know, you know, how you guys choose the number of varieties that you grow at the Ecology Center.
Yeah, I mean, so we essentially took over an organic farm that was a commercial organic farm that grew pretty much three things: strawberry,
Mhm.
cucumber, and Romanesco. And that was because when that farm was established in the 90s, that was the only way to make a profitable endeavor, or at least in their mind, which is how do we grow enough to fulfill wholesale demands in our bioregion and sell to the mother's markets or Whole Foods or Costco's that might want to buy these strawberries. And ultimately, when we took over the farm in 2019, we had a vision to do the exact opposite, which is that instead of commodifying, really focus on the quality and focus on the culture, and all of that, for all of human history is rooted in diversity, not in commodification or monoculturing. So, like I feel that we learn as a society in the Western world, there's like five fruits and vegetables. You've got red apples and you've got orange oranges and you've got yellow bananas, and that's it. That's the things that we teach kids. And the truth is that no, actually, in fact, there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of different varieties. And within those unique varieties, right? Like I was fortunate enough to go and study the history of corn in Oaxaca, Mexico. And they were telling us that there are 49 main varieties of corn, but within each one of those, there's hundreds and hundreds of different sub varieties that have different culinary application and flavors, or maybe pest resistance or weather resistance, or some might be for popping corn, some might be for flint corn or wheat corn. So for us, it's an opportunity to teach people, right? Well, by giving them something they've never had before. It's an opportunity to awake senses, an opportunity to maybe break down some of those preconceived barriers of, well, I don't like squash. Well, maybe you've never had this type of squash, right? So, the beautiful thing about our dinner series is that it's a fixed course dinner. You're getting the 5 or 6 courses that you're getting. And I like to tell people, yes, please let us know if you're vegan or have celiac, but pretty much otherwise, if you don't like tomatoes, tonight you're trying tomatoes. And by and large, it's amazing. We do this every single week. I don't think we've gotten any complaints once about like, oh, I didn't like that. You come from food service. I come from food service. I mean, if you're able to get away with one complaint in a night, you were usually having a pretty successful night. But we've somehow kind of opened up this opportunity to experience something in which you come in without preconceived notions, which is like, this is what I want and this is what I was expecting, and more with an open heart towards what if I were to learn something today? And that moment of curiosity ultimately is what I hope drives a little bit of that behavior change in the people that experience it.
So take us on a farm tour right now in the fall season. What would we see for showing up for dinner at the Ecology Center? What would we see before we walked around or sat down to the table?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think every farm tour or even like opportunity to be outdoors starts in a moment of grounding, right? And to me, that's taking stock or observation of where are we. So I like to take that both from the literal all the way out to the metaphysical or geopolitical. And I start with always acknowledging that this is a Hashemin land. That's the Native American community that was here well before us. We owe a lot of the stewardship practices at the Ecology Center and the programmatic as well as organizational intentions and values to that community. So I begin with that every time we have any conversation. I like to then do a very quick narrative arc of food systems, where we were, where we are, where we're going. And that can be, I mean, I'm happy to have a 3-hour conversation about that, but most people have maybe a 15-minute kind of palette for hearing about that. But I like to talk about what I mentioned to you, which is that, for all of human history, we had relationship to our agriculture. Communities were built around farms as a survival strategy and as a need. And then coming out of the World War I, World War II, and out of the Great Depression, both because of food scarcity concern as well as an abundance of petrochemicals, we industrialized our food system. And just to really shorten that, we replaced humans and animals with chemicals and machinery, and it's been a pretty bad idea. We essentially took a driver of health and turned it into one of disease, to the point now where agriculture is the single leading driver towards climate emissions on the planet. So you took this thing that nourished us all for tens of thousands of years, and now it's become literally a center for disease. Not to mention our own bodies, right? Like we're living in a time in which 2 in 3 men, including myself, are going to experience cancer in their life. And it's directly related to our environment and our surroundings and what we put in our body and what we put on our body. And all of those are agricultural practices. So that's a bit of the conversation on, I like to call it the bummer side, which is that, for the past 75 years, we haven't done a great job. We didn't value health, we valued convenience. And we really threw culture out the window when we did that. And now, I like to really awaken people to the fact that that doesn't need to be the future that we inherited. For much of human history, it wasn't that way. So it's actually not complicated or difficult to envision steps forward in which we do build health. And that's what our farm represents. So we're a humble 28 acres in San Juan, Capistrano, about a mile from the 5, a mile from the ocean, right in between LA and San Diego. So it's accessible to everybody. And this is just one small example of what it could look like if we were to bring agriculture and choose health for our communities. And it doesn't all need to look like this, but it's one way. And what that looks like today, and literally is diversified 28 acres of what we call regenerative organic agriculture, which both means it's organic as well as practicing soil conservation, animal welfare, and farm worker rights. And it's represented in an agroforestry where you have 250 varieties of fruits, vegetables, herbs, flowers, berries, and trees. And ideally, there is no one single monoculture that's representing the whole farm. So today, you were to walk out there, you would find all sorts of squash. You would find a lot of beautiful herbs right now. We have amazing basil. We have apples coming into season. We have stone fruit coming out. We've got eggplant and cucumber. Right now, it's a little bit of a unique summer to fall transition. So we're seeing the tomatoes and cucumbers kind of start to slow down and starting to see some of the winter crops kind of pick up a little bit.
Lovely. I can't wait to see what's down there. I'm going to volunteer at another dinner in a few weeks before my own. So
Yeah,
I'm really excited. Yeah, I'm just excited to play and touch the food and walk around because it's always different what you find, you know, at the Ecology Center because of the varieties versus obviously what you find at a grocery store or even a farmer's market sometimes.
Yeah, I think, and I don't blame farmers for this because it's the hardest job in the world, but you are swimming uphill. So when you're trying to convince people to try new things, but you're also trying to make a living, it's pretty tough for farmers to, really focus on diversity and promote new varieties that people may not be familiar with or accustomed to. So you do end up just because you have to sell your thing, focusing on that which folks are most comfortable with, and you don't get a lot of the cultural varieties that you might see here.
So tell me about some of the really creative food preparations you've seen from chefs that have worked in the outdoor kitchen at the Ecology Center.
Yeah, I mean it's so much fun to get to work with a different chef every week because you see all sorts of unique and fun expressions. We just had our biggest dinner of the year is called Green Feast. That's more of a fundraiser, and that's about 200 people on a long table in the middle of the field. And we get to work with some amazing chefs for that. And one of our favorite chefs, named Sarah Glover, who is from Australia, she's a bit of an adventure chef. She does a lot of really cool cooking out in the wild. She led the main at Green Feast a few weeks ago and did this really beautiful fish on a log, which is a bit of a indigenous expression of cooking these fish, where she took yellowtail and butterflied them and hammered them onto a log and essentially created a fire that was right on it, and stuffed them with lemongrass. And it was both beautiful and, from what I hear, delicious. I'm vegan, so I didn't try it, but fortunately for me, I would say 90+% of what we make here is plant-based, because we are a fruit, flower, herb, and vegetable farm. When we do focus on animal protein, it's something that comes from 20 miles away. So we're looking at, Dory Fleet in Newport or Dana or San Diego for seafood, and that's really just about it. And just in terms of creative things, gosh, I really enjoy, because like I said, I'm vegan, seeing what chefs do with fruits and vegetables, to be honest. And Tim Byers, one of my favorite chefs, lives in Texas, had a pretty much pit barbecue joint, is about as meat oriented as you can possibly get. And he is one of the most creative chefs that I've ever seen that work with fruits and vegetables. And I really appreciate that from him. And I hear it from a lot of chefs who, kind of say like, yeah, they may like meat or their clients might like meat, and that's cool. But ultimately, it's not that hard to do, and there's not many different ways to do it. But you can actually get very, very creative with what comes out of the ground. So I get excited about anything. But to be completely honest, the things I like the most are the ones that really feature and focus the ingredients heavily. So, just like a very simple tomato and cucumber salad is like, that's the best meal I've ever had. If you have good ingredients, you don't need to do a lot to them to make it delicious.
Yeah, all you need is really good olive oil, really good sea salt, some fresh herbs. But when the food is freshly picked, you get so much more flavor with your meal.
Yeah,
And you're
totally.
getting varieties that naturally have more flavor.
That's my selling point to folks, because we also have a farm stand here, and it is, it's a very beautiful and very diverse expression that is really kind of counter to anything that you might see in the store. And we do have conversations with folks around the fact, oh, well, your strawberries are $7 a pint. At the other store they're 6. And I like to talk to people, and I understand the issues around accessibility. And part of my job is to make this world and work more accessible to lower income or food insecure families. And that's a whole different conversation. But for a lot of us, it's really just the fact that we haven't prioritized, real food and the cost of not just production, but distribution. Uh, I like to talk about the fact that, and most people don't know this, we pay less for food in relation to our individual wealth than humans ever have in all of history. It used to be that the majority of your resources went to food, right, as a survival need. And it's really only since this industrialization era and, some of our parents microwave dinner and really focusing on the convenience and on the economics that we've really driven the price of food way, way down. And that's not a good thing, right? That's come at a
Right.
cost. It's come at a cost of our health and of our environment. So I like to talk about food as an investment, which is like, all right, you invest in your future financially, you invest in your children's education, you invest in your safety by buying a vehicle that meets your needs or standards. But, we still talk to people every single day who have plenty of resources and they say, oh, the berries are $1 more. For me, it's okay. You can talk about the environment, you can talk about nutrition, and that some people are driven by that conversation, and more, it's definitely a big movement. But the easier and simpler conversation, in my opinion, is just to be like, great, try one of each. Now, I guarantee you, like once you have these strawberries, you're not going to have any other strawberries, and it's not because ours are particularly special or better. Like if you grew your own in your backyard, they would also be special and better. The fact about strawberries that you get at Costco is that they come from Central America. They were picked pre-ripened so that they ripen in transit. They were put in plastic and they were put on a bus or on a train. And then 2 weeks later, they got here. Like, of course, they're not delicious. But we're going to convince ourselves that they are because you just drove to Costco and you paid to buy them and they look like a strawberry and they smell like a strawberry and they're red. So might as well. But it's really no comparison. And you know this if you've been to a farmer's market, if you've ever gardened, that you're eating that first tomato of the season, and then you go to a restaurant and you get a BLT, you're like, yeah, this is garbage. It tastes like nothing.
Absolutely. I've had my parents grow tomatoes outside our house and had them grow strawberries as well and blackberry bushes. And, it's so exciting when you see them and taste them that they often don't even make it back to the kitchen.
Right.
You just can't help but eat them right there. And when I was at the Ecology Center for a community table dinner, you took us into the strawberry fields and you mentioned that there are a number of varieties of strawberries that you guys grow. How many varieties do you guys grow of strawberries?
It's really year by year, but well over 6 to 8. And that's for many reasons. Some of the strawberries have different culinary applications, right? Like we might grow a strawberry specifically for jamming versus one that's good for you pick. That's a little bit hardier for the kids and their fingers. But really, it's also for pest resistance. If you put all of your energy and resourcing, and first, strawberries are a big one. It's something that this farm has grown for many years, well before us, and it's something that this community really enjoys. And who doesn't love strawberries? But it's a significant investment in labor and in seed and in time. So, you're starting your strawberries in December and it's a lot of land. And if all of a sudden you grow one variety and then come strawberry season in March or April, it fails because of the weather or because of disease or because of pest, all of a sudden, you've lost a quarter or half of your farm revenue that you were counting on that year. So for us, it's a bit of an insurance policy to grow a few different varieties, as well as, once again, the different flavors and culinary applications, and then the educational experience of, once again, bringing people into the fact that there is more than one strawberry. There's dozens of strawberries, and there's a lot of reasons why we might grow different ones.
Yeah, and it's just such a good reminder that there's more than one thing. There's more than one type of banana. There's more than one type of cucumber. Sometimes we all just need to see and taste that again to understand the variety in food, which I think then just makes you reflect on life and the variety and all the experiences that are out there, all the ways that you can experience life. I think it just snowballs into conscious expansion.
Absolutely. And opportunity. Like I think of seasonality in our cuisine as an opportunity, not as a restriction. People say like, "Oh, I'm bummed that I can't get, cucumbers until June or July." I say like, if you think about it the other way, which is abundance mindset versus scarcity, how special is it to have that first cucumber of the season? You're going to cherish it so much more than just something that you can always get all of the time by clicking a button on your computer and it shows up at your front door. We don't value the things that we don't invest in. So when everything is too easy, then there's really a lack of emotional and energetic commitment to that thing.
Well, what is the produce or the fruit that you're most looking forward to in this season?
Good point. Yeah, I love all of it. To me, the apples, the pears don't do that great on our farm. It's just not cold enough, but we have these really great apples that are starting to ripen that are really delicious and super beautiful and kind of tell a great story of the farm. But coming into the winter squashes and to be honest, anything that's seasonal is my favorite thing that day.
I feel the same way. I live for the apples in the fall, and I live for some kapocha squash, some butternut squash, um, and any soup that I can make with seasonal vegetables. That's what I'm down for.
Same. I probably make 5 soups a week. So whatever's coming out of the farm is whatever's souping that week.
Yeah, yeah. And then you can take the same ingredients and make it over and over again, but you can just change the way you chop the vegetable or decide to puree the soup. And you have a whole different meal using the same ingredients simply by changing the preparation just a little bit.
Well, I look forward to learning some soup techniques from you.
I'm really into pureed soups right now. I have a client that only likes their soups pureed, and it's completely changed the way I've enjoyed souping.
Okay, looking forward to it.
And I will tell you, if you use a hand immersion blender versus a Vitamix, you'll still get a completely different consistency of soup.
Okay.
The little things, the
Well,
little
yeah,
things.
it's enough.
Well, what would you say is the number one thing you want people to take away from their experience when they visit the Ecology Center or they enjoy a community table dinner?
Yeah, so for me, like not everybody is driven by a passion for agriculture. We are a farm here, but we're so much more than that. And like I keep saying over and over again, we're a a center, a space, a demonstration, or a model for health in a lot of meaningful ways. So for me, it's like almost whatever lights your fire is what I'm excited about. And if it's agriculture and a multi-generational or cultural commitment to that, which where you came from, that's great. Or if it's a passion for the environment and protection and conservation and sustainability, that's great. Or if it's one that's driven by health, I think that's great. Like I said, like I'm a cancer survivor and a lot of my health journey is really driven through what I eat. My wife and I were very committed to I've been vegan for 14 years. I've been in this movement for a long time. So I've always tried to really center around health, but in healing, it's a big part of what you do. And unfortunately, when we went to my oncologist in the beginning of my chemo treatment and asked him how to incorporate a healthy diet into a treatment, he said, I don't know, because they don't. That's not part of their training, and it's just because they're so focused on a very specific solution. But to me, it's like it's whatever is going to most effectively inspire folks to feel like they can be a part of the solution. And whatever that is, for a lot of people, it's wildlife. For many, it's waterways. We live here in such a beautiful coastal environment, and we don't realize that agriculture is one of the most harmful practices for our waterways and what we're putting out into the planet. So to me, it's come out and have a beautiful dinner, meet some nice people, have a good time, and walk away feeling as if there's hope for a better and healthier opportunity moving forward.
Since you have, changed your diet, started to eat vegan, focus on the quality that of food that you've eaten, what would you say are the three things that you learned in your journey of healing and now thriving that maybe a doctor wasn't able to guide you on that has really shifted how you feel in your body and how healthy you are now?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I grew up in a Mexican Jewish household, so animal protein is as prominent as it is in any other household in any culture in the world. And I kind of had a life, an experience of, eating heavy meals and feeling sluggish, and that was just what you did. There was no alternative, and you didn't really think twice. And it wasn't until, and this is over 20 years ago, becoming a vegetarian and almost 15 vegan. I realized that food and your diet can actually be energy giving. And you can eat a meal and feel better instead of worse. So that for me obviously has been, something that I obviously incorporate every single day. Um, but some of the other, I think, simple lessons are one that it's not that hard. Shifting your diet, I find, tends to be one of the most intimidating things that people can do in their life for a lot of reasons. Namely, because eating, really kind of along with sleeping, is one of the things that we most do. So when you talk about making a change, it feels incredibly daunting and intimidating for someone to conceptualize, how am I going to change something that I do every day, multiple times a day? But I find that once you get over that first kind of mental block, because there really isn't necessarily much more of a block. It doesn't need to be a financial block. Shifting the way that you eat can, based off of what your budget is, can be more affordable. I mean, the poorest countries in the world eat predominantly a plant-based diet. If you were to go exclusively to fancy vegan restaurants, yeah, you're going to pay more. But if you're going to focus on simple legumes and plant-based proteins, you're going to spend less. So, getting past that thought of the financial barrier, in our culture, a lot of times, especially for men, there's a bit of like a hyper masculinity around how you eat. We have this narrative that men need to be the grillers in the family and need to eat the steak and have these big portions. And for a lot of folks, fortunately not for me, there's a kind of a big step that they need to take in order to see themselves in a different light, where they say, oh, right, I'm not losing any of my masculinity by not eating that way or not being that expression in the kitchen. Actually, it's very interesting to, be interested in fruits and vegetables and a lot of culinary things you can do around them. So getting past that barrier, that I didn't find to be particularly challenging. And then the access, not everybody is here in Southern California. Not everyone's going to come visit the Ecology Center, but we're very fortunate to live in a time in which pretty much anywhere that you are, you're probably pretty close to some, maybe not farm, but farmer's market, and just finding that space and building those relationships and valuing and investing in that and getting to know people and asking them, hey, what are you growing right now? And what are you growing next season? And why do you grow that? And why does this look a little different than what I've seen before? Adds, I think, a richness and a culture to your diet that you really can't replace through a store or a subscription service. So all of those things are just, simple little, uh, they're decisions ultimately that we make. And as with every decision, and especially when it's oriented in behavior change, the hardest part is just deciding that you're going to make it. And then everything else comes after that.
Absolutely. Well, can you leave our listeners with maybe one healthy tip they can consider adding into their life if they were to just to choose one?
Yeah. Um, I mean, yes, the way that we eat is so critical. We've just talked about it for 45 minutes, but I think one that we don't think about all that much is just to be outside. I like to think about the health benefits of literally just going outdoors. And for me, I get to experience it every day because I work on a farm. So I take my phone calls or I take a walk for a meeting. So I get that every day, but I also very intentionally incorporate nature and outdoor space into my life as much as possible. I just got back Tuesday from a week in BC, traveling in the mountains and the provincial parks up there. And that for me is energy giving, spending time outdoors and, observing nature and wildlife. So that would be mine.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on the High Vibration Living podcast. It's so nice to connect with you and have you share your wisdom with a larger community that can't necessarily get to the farm. So I appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing you down at the Ecology Center very soon.
Thank you for having me. We'll see you soon. And anyone that's interested is welcome to come down and visit us and come and ask for me. I'd be happy to show you around.
Perfect. Thank you, Jonathan.
Absolutely. Have a good day.